Okay.
All right. Well, happy spring to everyone that's joining us. If you are in the Southern Hemisphere, happy fall, getting ready for the winter as we get ready for the summer. It's certainly a pleasure to be back for our second iteration of our Breeder Chronicles with the ALAC Legacy Project. My name is Clifton Kenon, and I am from Pennsylvania. And it's an ongoing pleasure to be able to host this with the support of the American Lhasa Apso Club. The purpose of this video series is to chronicle breeders that have given their life to the fancy and to the breed. Every month, we will take two breeders and we will hear their story. We will talk about their legacy, hear their wisdom and pearls for the future. And then the next month, we'll do two more to keep you all engaged. I invite you to submit your comments to us around things that you would like to hear, people that you would like to hear from, and we'll do our best to make that happen. But without further ado, I want to welcome you to part two or episode two of the ALAC Legacy Project Breeder Chronicles. And I am excited today to introduce our second breeder who we will be chronicling, and that is none other than the infamous, who needs no introduction, Miss Barbara Wood, more fondly known as Bobbie, from New Jersey in the United States. And her kennel name is, I think it's Anbara.
No,
Lhasa
Aunt
Apso
Bara. It's
is
Aunt Bara.
Anbara. So
Aunt
there we
Bara.
go. So welcome, Bobbie. We're glad to have you. Anything that you would like to say before we just jump right in?
Well, thank you very much for including me in this project. It certainly has been a lifelong, you know, interest and passion for me. Having started in 19, getting my first Lhasa in 1968. And here we are many, many, many years later. And I've
Just a
still
couple of
got
years.
Lhasas. What?
Just a couple of years.
Just a couple of years. Yes, right.
Oh my, 1968. I mean, it's the height of the civil rights movement. It's so many international things happening, globalization, industrialization. Lhasa Apso is relatively new to the common eye. So
Right.
let's go back to 1968. Maybe that's a great place to start. And that's where we're going to start. So who is Bobbie? Who is Bobbie Wood? And how does this story begin? If you want to start with before you got Lhasas or when you got Lhasas, wherever you want to start, answer this question for all of our listeners.
Well, uh, Bobbie is somebody who has spent um, years in television and in the theater and had very vast interest in theater. And also growing up, I had a passion for horses. And I had my own horse, my hunter jumper, and I did do hunting. Um,
Okay.
and loved horses. But when you grow up and you get on your own and your parents aren't paying anymore, um, you're sort of stuck because you can't afford it anymore, because you're, scraping by with what you're earning. And when you start out in theater, um, you don't make a lot of money. I mean, it's not all glamour or anything like that. I started out very slowly. I went to Boston University Theater School and graduated from there. Met a lot of people in theater through that. And then at my last summer in summer stock, which was in I did I did Mount Gretna, but it was in Pennsylvania, uh, um, Newfoundland, Pennsylvania. We had a little summer stock theater there, and I met two other gals, and we all decided to get an apartment together in New York and do our thing. They were both singers and musicians, and but still wanted to do musical comedy, and I love musical comedy and everything. But I came to New York and got a job working at Brooks Van Horn, which was a costume company. And just auditioned because I did want to be an actress, but that didn't happen. But that's okay.
Okay.
I got to do other things. I always said I wanted to be involved in theater, and I didn't care what I was doing as long as I was involved. So that's how I got started getting involved, and then got interested in children's theater. Did a lot of children's theater. Did a lot of summer stock. Um, did summer stock out in Mount Gretna, Pennsylvania, in Ohio, up in
So,
Pennsylvania.
Bobbie, when you say summer stock, what does that mean?
Well, summer stock is it well, it used to be a big thing. I don't know if it is anymore, but young actors and actresses would audition for these uh these I don't know whether you call them a program or not, but they were like little theater companies all over in New England and all well, I think that they were probably all over the country. But where they started in July and they put on a new show every week for the community. And I think the first one I did was in Weston, Vermont, the Weston Theater Company. And uh I got that through the technical director at Boston University, and he got me hired up there, and I got the job doing props, and I it's funny, I made $40 a week, and I owed my room and board to this lady that I was living with $20 a week. So I ended up, clearing $20 a week for everything else that I needed. That goes to show you what, starting out in theater does for you. But we had a good time. And even though I think that year that theater burned down, so we ended up in a school auditorium type thing for the rest of the summer. Then I got a job out in Newfoundland, Pennsylvania, um, with my eventual roommates, and I was the stage manager. And we had a nice little theater there and everything. That theater burned down. We ended up in another school, and I got to feeling like everything I was touching was turning to ashes, so to speak. But then after that, I worked up at the North Shore Music Theater up in Beverly, Mass, and I worked at a summer theater that was out in Ohio, um, doing Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf with Mercedes McCambridge, and that was thrilling. Um, but it starts with shows every one a week in July and sort of ends right before Labor Day. So it's like a full 8 week commitment to one project. And I loved it. I loved it. And at that point, I was at Boston University Theater School, and I graduated from there in I think 63, I think it was, or 64. I think maybe it was 64. And I came to New York, and that's when I started working at Brooks Van Horn, and eventually I got some gigs working in off-Broadway theaters doing props or doing sound effects or doing whatever they needed doing. I loaded in. I got signed up for um, um, what was it called, a company that loaded in shows and struck shows and stuff like that. So I worked with them, and whenever they needed anything, they'd call me up and say, "Do you want to do such and such?" And I'd say, "Okay," and I would go and do it. I I got my actor's equity card from A View from the Bridge, um, understudying Catherine, who was the lead ingenue. I always laughed about that because I was never going to play that part. But the company did that when we were closing. They offered equity cards to everybody who'd worked on the show for a long time, and I had, so that's how I got
So,
my actor's equity card and started, stage managing for a lot of off-Broadway shows at that point. And then eventually, a person who was brought in to start Sesame Street doing sound effects for it. He was working at ABC as a sound effects artist, and he had to go back to work. And he called me up, and I knew him from doing other things, other projects. And he called me up and he said, "Do you want to do sound effects?" I said, "Sure. What am I, what show am I doing?" He said, "You're going to do Sesame Street, which is a new children's program that's starting up." And I said, "Oh, sure. I'd love to do that." Well, that turned into a full-time job, um, as full-time as it could be, because we only taped, I think when I started, we were taping 22 weeks a year, and it eventually we had um so much in the can that we went down to 16 weeks that we taped. But that was the start of my sound effects career. And then eventually I went to work for ABC as a sound effects artist, and I was there for like 25 years, my lifetime.
so
So,
Bobbie, this New York City girl who is, studied in Boston, was at Sesame Street from the beginning. Where in the world did Lhasa Apsos come into the picture? Because, as you're telling your story, most people don't think of dog breeders as people that are working on Broadway, working for national television. So, in the midst of all of this, how in the world does a kennel and a breeding program come to be?
well, it's very funny. I had a friend um who loved animals, and she came up to visit me one year. I was doing summer stock in Pennsylvania. Yeah. And we had um let's see, we had it was a good company. We were doing all musicals, and I was stage managing plus doing some acting. I got to play Bloody Mary in South Pacific, which was fun. Um, and she came up to visit me, and she met another friend of a friend there, and um, they got together after the season was over, um, and they decided to um, get dogs. And so they wanted Lhasa Apsos, or they decided to get Lhasa Apsos. I don't know how that decision was made. But I said, those are wonderful. They're so cute. I always wanted a shaggy dog, like the shaggy dogs in the movies. I just thought they were so cute, and I just wanted one like that. Um, I knew nothing about purebred dogs, I mean, I grew up with a collie, who was lovely. But that was the breed of dog my brother wanted. And so, I didn't get to choose. But the breed of dog that I wanted was something shaggy and little and cute and that sort of thing. So they went out and they got two dogs, and they bought them from very good breeders. One got one from Ruth Deck, and then Jean got hers from Anna Griffing. So it had a lot of the original Hamilton in its pedigree. And so when I think about it, maybe a year later, they decided to go their separate ways because Swoozie wanted to go to Hollywood because she wanted to be a Hollywood actress. So they sort of parted company. And Jean was basically a cat person, and she had Siamese cats. And so she said to me, she called me up one day and she said, "Do you want my little Lhasa that I got from Anne Griffin?" And I said, "Sure, I'll take her." And so she became my first dog, um, that went everywhere with me. She even went up to, Mount Gretna when I was doing summer stock there. And she used to sit right, I, as the stage manager, you sit right rings, not ringside, stage, the side of the stage where you operate the curtain and you give out, sound cues and light cues and everything when it happens. You have to follow along the script. Well, she used to sit right by my feet through the performances, through rehearsals. She was always with me. It was funny when anybody ever came into the theater to ask a question of the director or something while we were in rehearsal. Buttons would She would run up on stage and stand between the actors and the new person who came in because she knew that that person didn't belong, and she would bark like hell at them until they left. And I went and got her. I said, "Come on, Buttons, you're not supposed to do that." But one night at a curtain call, oh, this was so embarrassing. Um, at a curtain call for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and I opened the curtains, and guess who's sitting it's front and center in the stage, looking out at the audience with all her. She had a really bad undershot jaw, sitting there with all her teeth hanging out, looking at the audience, and oh my God, it cracked them up. And after such a serious play, um, that was, probably not the best thing to have happen. So then the producer came up to me and says, "From now on, you have to tie her up during the show." I said, "Yes, I will, I promise." So that never happened again, but it brought down the house.
So did you
But
go on to breed this first dog? Like how did you get into breeding and showing?
well, I lived in New York City, and my mother was going to get me. I had a really big station wagon car that was like just, if anybody's ever lived in New York City and tried to park their car, it's an impossible feat. And I decided that I wanted to get a Volkswagen Bug because it was a good size. It could get me wherever I needed to go, and it was small enough that I could fit into little tiny parking spaces. And so my mother took me up to, my mother was living in Pelham Manor. And so we went up there to the Volkswagen dealer. And of course, Buttons came with me. And so we're getting out of the car and we were going into the showroom to sort of like do the order. And all of a sudden, this man came running across the street, running up to me. He said, "That's a Lhasa Apso, isn't it?" I said, "Yes, it is. How did you know?" And because, when anybody ever asks you at that time, "What is it?" and you'd say, "It's a Lhasa Apso," they go, "It's a what?" You know? Um, so his name was Hugh O'Donnell. And he says, "Well," he says, "my wife breeds them." And I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "That's interesting. I was thinking about breeding her because her original owners wanted her to have puppies. And so I thought I would do it, just because it sounded like something fun to do." And so he gave me his name and address, and I called up Brenda. And sure enough, she had a champion stud dog that came down from Anna Griffing's bloodlines. And not knowing anything about it, it didn't really register on me that was a good thing. But so I made arrangements with Brenda O'Donnell, and that was Brenda O'Donnell. And we became really, really good friends. And I had the litter. She told me everything to do. She um, you know, helped me with raising them and everything and picking out which one I was going to keep. And uh, and the funny thing it was too, um, she almost had them on the hood of a car in New York City. I think she got into trouble, and not knowing anything, I called up the vet and he said, "Well, I'll be right over. So bring her over to my office." And his office was like about 2 blocks from my apartment. And so I picked her up and carried her over there. And at one point, see, he wasn't there yet. And I put her on the hood of a car and she let out this huge scream. And in the halls of the caverns of New York City apartments, oh my God, it sounded like somebody was being murdered. And and all of a sudden there was a puppy. I went, oh my God, it's a puppy. So the vet finally arrived and delivered the rest. I had a litter of four males, my first four male litter. And I've had five all male litters in my lifetime. But anyway, that was not what I wanted because I did want to keep a bitch, but I ended up with four boys. And so one of them I really liked and Brenda thought was, a nice dog. So he had a really pretty head and face. He looked just like his dad and that. Um and so I ended up keeping him. And then Brenda said, well, why don't you show him, take him to some shows? And I said, well, I don't know anything about it. So she said, well, find a handling class, do that. So I found a handling class over in the east side above a above a Chinese restaurant where the staircase looked like it was falling off the wall. Every time we went up there, I thought, oh, is, is this staircase going to make it?
Is this going to be the end of it all?
And I thought so, yep. But anyway, it was a great handling class. It was taught by a handler from Long Island, and it had some great people in it. I know that a lot of people, won't recognize the name, but Bob Capel was there with one of his miniature poodles, and he was a very big poodle person and very nice guy.
I
Um,
know that name. I
yeah,
started in poodles, and that's a name that I remember people talking about.
oh yeah, yeah. His poodles won the garden and everything else. I mean, he campaigned them. I can't remember now who was his handler. I don't know whether it was uh I can't remember who handled for him. I don't it might have been Edwards, but I don't remember anyway. But anyway, we became good friends. And that's where I met my friend Sarah Fitzgerald because she had just gotten a dog from Kiki and she was starting to show. So we ended up going to shows together. We went to a whole lot of matches. I mean, I swear I became the match show queen. Bojangles just cleaned up and match shows like gangbusters. But when we finally ended up going, I finally ended up going to my first point show. Um, up at it was Taconic Hills, and I really the match showed it told you what to do when you were in the ring, and handling classes what to do when you were in the. You get to a point show and it's all different, and I didn't know what I was doing. I went in the ring for my class. I came out of the ring. I didn't know when I was supposed to go in or go out or whatever. Um, but needless to say, we didn't win anything. We won our class because we were the only one in it. But you know, so it meant I had to go in for winners and all that stuff. But I didn't understand that. I was always last coming into the ring and going out. I didn't know whether to stay or to go, but finally figured it out. And so I thought, well, I'm going to ask the judge what he thought of my dog. And he said, he was really mean. I went up to him and I said, what did you think of my dog? And he looked at him and he said, well, maybe somebody will like him. And so that really was discouraging for me. Um, but at the same time, um, at all my match shows, I met Kiki Blumberg, or Kiki Khan, as people know her for now. But and that was the same show that I met Steve Campbell at. And so we all competed in this match show. I didn't win, but that was okay. But afterwards, it was over. I went up to Kiki, and I said to her, I saw her carrying a Lhasa, and I said, "Oh, you've got a Lhasa." I said, "My name's Bobbie. What's yours?" And she said, "Kiki Blumberg." And I went, "Oh, I've heard of you," sort of like that. And I said, "Would you go over my dog and tell me what you think?" And so after judging was over, Kiki came over and she went over him and she looked at him and she said, She said, "Do you love him?" And I said, "I worship the ground he walks on." And she said, "Well," she said, "take him home and love him and make him a nice pet." She said, "But you need to go out and get yourself a show dog because this is not a show dog." And I thought that was the nicest way she could have, you know, burst my bubble. Not that it did. I still loved him for the ends of the earth and back again. But um, so that's what I did. I went out and I got with Brenda. Brenda had bred a bitch to that she had to one of Ellen Lonogro's sires. And so I took a bitch puppy out of that litter. And that's what got me really going into point shows and stuff like that because I took her to match shows, but I also took her to point shows, and she reached a point where she started to win, and I finished her, and pretty much quickly, and then I bred her, and out of that litter I kept some more, and that's what started it all. It just you keep going on and on and on. Every new experience you learn a little bit more and you go a little bit further in the process, um, and became wonderful friends and very dear friends with Steve Campbell, who we eventually ended up breeding many, many dogs together and just going to dog shows together also, in addition to Sarah was not as adventuresome as I was. She didn't want to go far and wide, and Steve and I sort of, went far and wide because he was more adventuresome too. So we ended up going to a lot of long drives together.
So let's
And
just pause for a second, Bobbie, and talk about some of the pictures that are on the screen because like there's so much information. So on the screen, there is a picture of the theater and Mount Gretna, which you talked about. So like that's a part of your story. Like it's hard to put it all together and thinking about this New York City girl who's working on Broadway and Lhasa Apsos, but the theater community actually was like the grounding for you getting a Lhasa. And your kennel name. Tell us about your kennel name and then this picture in the bottom left corner.
okay, my kennel name is Ann Barra. The Ann stands for Anthony, and the Barra is the last four letters of my name, Barbara. And so the picture on the bottom is my brother and I when we were very little. um, but my brother ended up dying when he was 12 from leukemia, and that was in 1950. And back then there was no cures for that kind of childhood cancer. And it was devastating to my family and I, and so then I ended up growing up an only child. Um, and so uh, I wanted to have him included in my life in dogs. And so I made up this kennel name and include him as part of my venture. And so that's very dear to me. Um,
Good for
that
you. What a great way. So
Yeah,
that is a picture of you as a toddler, and then your brother who passed away, unfortunately, from leukemia. And then to the right of that picture is the lady that made it all the wheels turn for you, right?
yep, she started it all out. Yep, Brenda and I became very close friends. We went to England one year together, and we were going to start breeding West Highland White Terriers, and we went to a couple of West Highland White Terrier kennels in England, and we bought a puppy that was just adorable. Oh, so cute. And we ended up, because it was at a time when the gasoline shortage was on. You know, I don't think there was no war going on, but it was just a real bad time for gasoline shortage. And so Planes were like over full because they weren't flying as many. And so we get to the airport. Her parents took us to the airport, and when we got there, they wouldn't let us fly with the puppy. So we gave the puppy to her parents, and they raised the puppy and had the puppy for that puppy's lifetime. So, but that was the end of our West Highland
That
White
was
tour.
the end of the West Highlands. Okay. And then all the way to the right, we have Big Bird and what I assume is Sesame Street.
Yes, that's Sesame Street. That's Charlotte Ray, who was the mail lady, and the dog is Mr. Bojangles, my Lhasa that didn't make it as a show dog, but he did get his obedience CD, so he is a part of Lhasa history. Um, so, but anytime they needed a dog, they always came to me and said, "Can you bring in your dog?" And so he was in some of some of these things are not like the other um songs, and he was a regular, a frequent visitor to Sesame Street, and he loved it. He loved everybody. He
So
was
the dog that didn't become a show dog became a TV star?
yes, right,
I
right. That's
would
a
say that's a
good
hefty constellation. So this is wonderful. Let's keep digging, Bobbie, and talk to me about people that were inspirational and influential to you. And we have a couple of people on the screen, but maybe there's a couple more.
Yeah. Very definitely Steve Campbell, who
Who's in the bottom right?
yeah, holding Mary Poppins, our best in show bitch that I got a best in show on. Um, and we bred her together, and Steve was always so wonderful and so giving of his knowledge. He was further along in knowledge than I was. But I certainly picked his brain totally, constantly, for information. And he owned Taboo's King of Hearts, and he showed him at that time. And Kingy was a wonderful, beautiful typey Lhasa Apso. And the thing about King was when you bred him, you could see his puppies in the ring. I mean, they were stamped with the King of Hearts, you know, I'd say logo, but you know what I mean? You could tell a king puppy in the ring against all
Absolutely.
the others. And it just went on, and I always wanted to breed to him. Um, and so and I used to go to Steve's house. He lived down in Trenton, in the Trenton area, and he's a banker. And I went down to his place practically almost every weekend, and we went to shows together. And we talked and talked and talked, and he was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful friend. Steve and I have bred, oh, at least 25 champions together, through my breeding to King of Hearts, and um, to breeding to Rumpelstiltskin, Reimar's Rumpelstiltskin, who was the number one Lhasa in the country in um, 1978 and 79. And then I bred my Abracadabra, I think it was, yeah, Abracadabra to King of Hearts, and produced Ambara's Hobgoblin, who was the number one Lhasa in the country in 1980 and 81. And they were both handled by Jean Lade, who was a very prominent handler at that time, mainly in the coated breeds, because she was excellent groomer and really took good care of the coats, which you have to have a handler who understands Lhasa coats. And then after I had that experience, I bred to Rumpy and produced a litter that Steve and I drove out to, where was it? I think it was in Kentucky somewhere. But we got in the car and drove out there for a futurity that Marianne Nixon was judging.
And
And
that's the lady that's on the left.
yes, that's the lady on the left. And she was just wonderful. She found Steve showed Abby and I showed Ruffy and her brother. And I think I got maybe second in Ruffian's class. Steve went on to win his class and to win Grand Futurity winner under Marianne with my Abby Abracadabra. And so through that, I got acquainted with Marianne. I met her. And that was about, I think that was the year that my mother died. And as you would probably imagine, that upset me terribly, just terribly. And so, I would call Marianne occasionally at that point, and Marianne said, well, why don't you come out here for Christmas? Or why don't you just come out here for a visit and stay for some time, and you'll have a good time. And I said, well, okay. You sometimes think that people are just being nice to be nice, they don't really mean it. Well, I learned very rapidly Marianne meant it. She meant every word she said. And so I finally gave in. I arranged to go out for, I think, the Whidbey Island shows. I didn't bring a dog. I just came out with Marianne, but Marianne was showing at those shows, and her daughter Leslie Ann was. And I spent about, I guess a week out there. And Marianne and I never stopped talking about dogs and about losses and about everything. I mean, I think the day that I arrived, we got to the point and I had a lot of jet lag. And we got to about, for me, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. For Marianne, it was like 11 or something. And she said, I'm going to get out these movies that I took, and we can watch the movement of these dogs. Because Marianne was the epitome of a student and had so much knowledge. And if she didn't know something, she was the kind of person that searched until she found the answer that she wanted to hear, or that she knew was correct, or that she understood was correct. So she gets out the movies that she's been taking for years of the Lhasa Ring and everything. And we're talking, and I'm trying so hard to keep my eyes open. And I'm like falling asleep. And I said, Marianne, do you think we can look at some more of this tomorrow? Because I'm falling asleep. She says, oh, we will. So I went to bed at 3 o'clock that night. Didn't wake up, I don't think, till 11 the next morning. But and then we started talking again. And Marianne just included me in her life and in her family's life. I went out there for Christmas, I think for 30 years. Um, and all up until the time when I got too crippled and she got sick. And but for 30 years I was there for every Christmas, and it was just glorious. I went out a week before Christmas. I stayed till after New Year's. And we we just, and Marianne was so good to me. Um with breeding dogs. She sent me dogs to show and to breed, and she let me use her stud dogs for everything I wanted to breed to. Um, and Mary Poppins was a product of SJW Waffle Stomper, who was a great dog, died too young. And but she was a best in show dog. I put a best in show on her all by myself. She won quite a few groups. Got back at that time, got like 19 group twos. And every time she got a group two, there was a different dog behind her. I mean, the dog that was in front of her the day before was behind her the next day, so to speak. And she just was a spectacular little dog. And then she eventually won our national specialty when she was 11 years old, um, from the veterans class.
Oh, wow.
And it was Mike Billings who judged that. And she said to me, she asked me how old she was. I said, well, she's about 11 and a half. And Mike Billings says, well, she doesn't know it. And she didn't. She just got in the ring and she was the epitome of a show dog. Um, and the sad part about it was that Puppins never produced any puppies. She had, when I finally ended up having her spayed at 7, they found like tumors in her uterus, just which precluded her getting pregnant. So that was a sad realization of that.
So
But
there's Steve and there's Mary Ann. Is there anyone else?
well, um, the other person who I've had an ongoing relationship with for I think all my dogs and losses is my friend Sarah Fitzgerald, and we've bred many litters together. We work together. We live like 3 minutes apart from each other. And when I moved out to New Jersey, she came with me, and she ended up buying a house for herself and her mother here in Cranford, and her brother eventually moved to Cranford. So, but Sarah and I have been, and she's a la Sarah Lhasa Apsos. Um, we have been so much, so had so many good experiences together, friendships and stuff like that, that she's just been, invaluable to my life. And I care for her deeply, and we still do. I mean, we talk to each other, on a weekly basis, if not daily. If I need something, she helps me. If she needs something, I help her. And we love the dogs, and we've co-bred many many litters together, and it's such a good arrangement because the puppies will go spend time at her house, then they'll spend time at my house. If I ever have to go away, the puppies go over to her house, then they come back to my house. I mean, so they get um a well-rounded you know
Socialization and
yes, yes,
experiences. Okay,
exactly.
so we got to keep moving
Okay.
because I mean there's so many other things that we could jump into, but we better keep moving before we get in trouble. So let's talk about a few of this is just a few of the many dogs that you've had that have graced the Liza world. But if we could just briefly talk a little bit about each one. So who's the dog on the left with the beautiful reach in the front?
That's Maestro. That's my maestro. He's a group winner, a multiple group winner. He's a specialty winner. He's a ROM sire. Um, he also has obedience degrees, rally degrees, scent work degrees, a trick title. And he became my obedience dog once when I didn't have Alec anymore. So he was a good boy. He did everything I wanted him to do, and he never complained about it. But he was very good. He he was a love, yeah. And Pat Martello took him to special him for a while. And he won a couple of groups with her and stuff like that. But he wasn't out long enough that he really, you know, he was in the top 10, I think, the year that he was campaigned, but it didn't continue.
And what about to the right?
To the right is the love of my life, after Puppins, was Ambara Alicera. Sarah and I bred him together, Smart Alec, and he had a CDX, he had an RAE, he had many many titles to his name, and he won the national specialty in 2001, I think it was, and then in 2000 in
Yes, if I look really closely at that picture, it says 2001.
Oh, oh, good. You can see it. I can't. In 2006 and in 2008. He went high in trial in our obedience and our national obedience um, show trial. And he's the only Lhasa in the history of the breed to have won both the breed and high in trial at our national specialty.
And who's the judge in this picture?
That's Mike Billings.
And I see Mr. Campbell to the right.
Yep, he was president, I think.
Okay, let's keep going. So in the upper left, I see a best in show dog there.
That's Mary
And is that Mr.
Poppins.
Campbell a couple
Yep.
years ago?
Yep. Because, yep, that's Steve and I co-bred her, and he was there that day. She went best in show. And so that was so exciting. He got to see his little girl go best in show with me showing her. Yep.
And then another best in show dog underneath there. I am not able to see what year that is.
I don't know, but it had to have been probably in 80 or 81 because that's Ambara Hobgoblin, who I bred and who was sired by King of Hearts. And he had five best in shows in his career, thanks to Gene Lade. And he even got a best in show from Ann Rogers Clark, which I was absolutely over the moon about, because she was a toughie, you know. Um, and but she was great. Um, it
And
was
who is that handling, Bobbie?
with a goblin.
Mm-hmm.
That's Gene Lade.
Okay. And
Yeah.
do you recognize the judge there?
Oh, let me put my glasses back on here.
And that is 1981. I see it on the actual
Oh,
ribbon.
okay. Oh, I can't remember his name, but he was an old guy. He judged a lot back in those days. But I can't remember what his name was.
Okay. And then what about what over to the right? This is in 1978.
That was Grin. No, that's a bitch. That was the frivolous fox. And Bar Rymar, the first frivolous fox. Um, she was she's a top producer in the breed. She produced 10 champions. Um, and she produced beautifully no matter who she was bred to. Um, and just loved her. She was a wonderful, wonderful bitch. Um, lived at home and just was a beautiful, beautiful show dog.
And a great producer. Wow, that's what
Yep.
all of us want.
Yep.
Beautiful show dogs and great producers. That's the name of the game.
Got that right. Yeah, right.
Not quite always that easy. To the left, this beautiful dog, and I can feel the coat from the camera.
Oh, the silver dog.
Yep.
Yeah, that's Embar Rymar Grinnin Barrett, ROM. Um, he was campaigned by Doug Holloway. He's a best in show dog, multiple group winner, and he was just an adorable dog. Oh, so cute. He was little. He was little. And he went out to Marianne and she bred her top winning bitch, Sanjo's Hustle Bustle, her best in show bitch to him. And they produced a beautiful litter of, I think it was four champions. Um, but he was just darling. And I think that when he finished his campaign, um, the Rita Holloway and Dougie just loved him so much, and I let them keep him till he died. But he was just a personality plus, personality plus. I remember whenever I brought a bitch over to be bred to him, he would run over. He would play with her for a while. He'd run over to the papers, poop on the papers, and come back and get the job done.
Oh, wow.
It was
All
so
right.
you knew that was going to happen.
And the two beautiful face Lhasas to the right.
Those are the two my two little sisters. They're still here. It's their birthday today. They're 13 years old
Well,
today.
happy birthday, ladies.
Yeah, the one on the uh well, is it the one on the left is Lily and the one on the right is Danny. Their real names are Enbara Alicera Dancing Diva, which is Danny, the one on the right, right, and the other one is Enbara Alicera Yankee Diva, and she's getting nosework titles like mad. She's exhibiting in scent work, so they're both grand champions. And Lily is a best in show owner, national owner handler series bitch. And Danny has won, she's a multiple best in specialty show winner. So, but they weren't campaigned or anything like that. They just got their grand championships and then we came home to do other things.
Well, it sounds like they are doing other things and they're still making you a proud dog mama. Let's
Yeah.
talk about this adorable little puppy that's all ready for the rain.
Isn't that cute picture? That is Kumi Cayenne's hot affair. And that was when she was 12 weeks old, where she's sitting in the umbrella with the boots. And then that's her when she grew up to be champion Kumi Cayenne's hot affair. And she's got some obedience and rally titles too. Um, she almost got her CD, but she had a attention deficit disorder. I mean, she really was fun to work with, but she noticed everything around her and, would go, we would be trying to do something. All of a sudden she says, well, I think I'll go over here now for a minute. I'll get back to you. And she did it to her own pace. So she was hard to train, but we had a lot of fun. We trained a lot. And so now, and she lives now with Sarah, and she's 15 years old now. And she got her ROM with her only first and only litter. So she was she that was all she wanted. Or she thought she wanted puppies, but really, I don't think she really liked them until they got big enough that she could play with them. And then she played with them and she played too rough with them. I was always having to go save a puppy from Ari who thought they were just squeak toys, I think. She was very silly, but she's wonderful and she was lovely and she was happy and funny, a real character, a real character.
It sounds like it. All
Yeah.
right, so let's talk about some memorable moments, right? So, Broadway, ABC, Breeder, uh, so many outstanding accomplishments with your dogs, but they culminate in some national recognition and some other things. So, I put a few things up on the screen, but just feel free to tell me about some of your most memorable moments as a Lhasa person.
Well, um, I will say that winning the national, I think, was top on my list. I thought after that, after I won my first um uh national specialty, um, everything in my life sort of like mellowed out. And it was like I'd reached a goal. And then after that, everything was gravy. You know what I mean? Um, I didn't, I never expected Alec to win the national when he did, because I remember that day I was out there and I think it was a big specials class, and I took one of my puppies who was also entered that I showed out to exercise while the breed was going on. And somebody came out and said, Bobbie said, you better get out there. Your dog is first in line. And I went, what? Really? And so I went running back in and I just in time to see her point to Alec as national specialty winner. So, that was something that was unexpected. Um, my ALEC going high in trial after that was just more icing on the cake. Um, just We had such a bond. I mean that dog was my shadow. Just he followed me around. He slept at my feet, and then every 10 or 20 minutes, he would get up and he'd jump on my knee and say, Mom, I'm here. I'm here. And I'd say, Oh, I know you are. And I'd give him a kiss and then he'd go back to sleep for another 10 or 20 minutes. And then he'd get up and say, Mom, I'm here. I'm here. Oh my God. That does that get into your heart? He was always so willing to do whatever I wanted him to do. And then I tragically lost him when I was getting ready to go to a national, and it broke my heart. Just broke my heart. I thought I would be, out of dogs when he passed, but they managed to get me back in, you know. Um, so, but then and other highlights are judging the national and the regionals a couple of times. Um, the the entry was spectacular both times I did it, and I really enjoyed it. It's so much fun and so rewarding to judge your own breed. Um, and I did that a few times. Um,
And I think you had is it Member of the Year Lifetime Achievement with ALAC?
well, I've had both, so
Okay.
I'm not sure what that plaque says, but it's one of them. And then in the same at the same way back in 2011, I was honored by the AKC as being named the breeder of the year of the non-sporting group. And that was like, I called up Marianne and I said, Marianne, this is you. Everything I am, you taught me, and I share this with you. It should have gone to you. I thought, because I thought Marianne was, certainly the epitome of what a breeder should be. She was, just so knowledgeable in everything she did. She always made sure that you learned something. Um, when you called her up to breed to one of her dogs, she always said, Well, now tell me, what does your bitch need? She wouldn't just say, Okay, you can breed to my dog. She wanted to know what the bitch needed that her dogs could possibly improve upon. Or she would know which dog to suggest that it would correct the the trait you were um, trying to solidify. And I so I, it's but so it was because of Marianne that I won that. I can't think of any other reason. Um,
Wow.
that
Well, she's a part of your story. This is what this is all about. So, you have had a lot of memorable moments, but you've been very faithful and dedicated to the preservation of pedigree dogs and in the fancy. And, you've worked in quite a few clubs. You've done judging. I'm sure you've done other service with ALAC and the board. So, uh, as quickly as someone with this many um, identities could do so, why don't you tell us a bit about the service to the fancy and what you've enjoyed the most?
Well, with ALAC, I love ALAC. Steve got me involved with ALAC and with I think I started out helping him with the awards. We started out doing awards together, and that was back when the National was at Trenton, and we always had the annual meeting at a uh, restaurant somewhere in New Hope area, and so he got me involved with that. And then when he moved on to something else, I stayed with the awards. and then got on a lot of committees. I think I made it onto the board of ALAC in the 70s, and have been a member of the board for um, oh, all these years. I took a rest somewhere in the teens, but now I'm back on the board again. I'm on the breed standard committee, the show steering committee, the national steering committee. I've done the awards. I was the editor of the bulletin, putting out a bulletin from I think 2003 to 2017 when my eyesight went bad. Um, and I've enjoyed all those committees that I've been on. I really do enjoy them. I enjoyed being part of the the revitalization of, so to speak, of our breed standard. Um, I'm very proud of that, what the work we did with that. Um, so then the other clubs that I belong to, I was a, a starting member of the Versatile Canine Sports Club, where we do obedience and rally and all kinds of sports with the dogs. I'm also a member and was president of the non-sporting group club of the Garden State for many, many years. Um, I just gave that up, but I'm on the board. I'm president of Twin Brooks Kennel Club and show chairman. So I've got a lot of work to do for that club. And I've been a member of, I'm the Cascade Lhasa Apso Club, National Capital Area Lhasa Apso Club, the Merrimack Lhasa Apso Club, was member of the now defunct Lhasa Apso Club of Westchester and the Lhasa Apso Club of Greater New York. I was a charter member of the Lhasa Apso Club of Greater New York. Um, but so show me a club and I join it. It's like um, I'm also on the board now of Somerset Hills Kennel Club, which is a nice club to belong to. So I just keep joining and working for these clubs because you know you have to do something. You know, I'm just like to be active and like to be a part of things.
Well, with all of those clubs you just named out, that's like full-time work.
Yes, yeah, pretty much is. Yep, pretty much is. Yeah, I agree. I agree. But I enjoy it and I enjoy the people. I enjoy talking to people in other aspects of dogs and enjoy doing different dog sports and stuff like that. It's fun and it keeps me busy. Keeps me getting up in the morning.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
we're coming towards the end of the interview now. So we're actually going to stop the screen. And for those of you that have been listening, you know, here is our lady of the hour. So this is who we are. We're real people. I guess I'll come on the camera too. So we've been talking, and the format is set up this way so we can maximize people being able to see the presentation, people that may be listening while they're driving, but we always like to end letting the audience see our guests face to face. So, Bobbie, in these final moments and thinking about from 1968 to now, what are things that, concern you or create despair in your heart as it relates to the breed? And what are some things you're hopeful that people in the future will do in response to that?
Well, um, the sad part of it is that I'm watching our breed disappear in this country. And it's very disheartening when you spent your life in a breed. I can remember when I started showing, it took, even at its lowest point, it took 7 dogs to get a 3-point major. Now it's down to four. And I can remember at one point at the height of our popularity, it took 12 dogs for a 3 point major and about 18 or 19 bitches for that. And it was like very difficult, to finish dogs at that point. Um, and I'm just so worried that now um, the people who are being um, approved to judge the breed as a low entry breed, they don't even have to go to a national. They just have to take a test and um, have their interview that they know something about the breed in with the AKC rep. And that bothers me because there's so much about this breed that is so important to the breed type, and we're going to lose that because you watch judges and you scratch your head and you say, you know why did they put up that head, or why did they put up that silhouette? I mean, they're not realizing that we want what we want in a Lhasa head. It's not a Shih Tzu head. We want a Lhasa head. And so many of the heads in this day and age are very close to being, more Shih Tzu like, in that they have deeper stops and round eyes. It's very hard to find the correct eye in the breed. And I know that I haven't always gotten what I liked on the dogs that I had, but you kind of go with what you've got, unless you're a very big kennel and can be very picky. But I bred litters maybe once or twice a year, and that's it. So, with that small population, you sort of keep the best of what you get. But it sort of turned out okay for me. But the and the fact that the breed is a rectangle, not a square. It's very hard for people to understand that. But, especially with new judges, when they see the different things in each class, they see differences and they sort of like go, I don't know which is correct, because they haven't seen enough of the dogs. That's the problem with that's happening to the breed, is new judges aren't seeing enough of the what's good in the breed. They're just seeing what's out there. And um
And in some cases, new judges are hardly seeing anything.
well, exactly. I mean, that's right. That's you're absolutely right. They get one dog or none. Especially in my area that used to be a hotbed for losses. Oh my goodness, there used to be so many breeders in this area.
Yeah.
Now there's one,
What
maybe.
are your pearls of wisdom for, you've worked in all of these clubs over the years. What is the state of dog clubs, and what is your, hopes for them in the future?
Well, with all the people that I've worked in dog clubs with, um, dog clubs are made up of people who are like-minded, and there are two types of people who join clubs. They're the people who want to put on shows and want to really work for the club. And then there are other people who just like belonging to the club in name only. And unfortunately, the people who are the workers, they work and work and work and work. And pretty soon they get burned out because they've got so much work to do all the time. And so the clubs sort of like start shriveling down, and it's the people who are working hard to keep him alive um, are burning out. And the new people who come in, they just want to be a part of the club, and they don't care so much about all the stuff that's gone on before and all the stuff that's going on now. And I think that's very sad. I think that when you join a club, it's your responsibility to be a part of it, work for it, do what you can for it. I mean, unfortunately, I'm at a place where I can't really do that much for anybody. But back when I was physically able to, I worked hard, for clubs and did, hard things to do. But now I can't so much anymore. I can't see well and I can't walk and I can't. So it's hard getting old.
Well, you've had quite the life. I think, we didn't talk about this, but I think you have some, what are they called? Are they Emmys? I think you have some Emmy
Oh,
awards.
yeah, I've got 4 Emmys. Yeah, I won 4 Emmys. Yeah.
So, you've won it all. Someone that has done so much as you and been in so long, I think it's okay to say that, you can have a break and may not be able to do as much as what you did before, because not many people, have this successful career in broadcasting and have been very successful in dogs and are still contributing at your age. I dream of living at the beach and my show dogs being beach dogs all day and um, in the near future. So it is absolutely wonderful that you are still here and can tell these stories. I bet there's people that are listening and they're gonna like hear some of the names you called out, and it's gonna make them walk down memory lane. And some of the pictures are gonna remind them of people that, had influence with them also. So it's been wonderful to bring all of this together. Even though we had several conversations leading up to this, even I learned new stuff today, and we had quite a few conversations getting ready for this. So, as
Mhm.
we get ready to say goodbye, is there any last thing that you'd like to say or for people to remember about you before we say goodbye for this episode?
Well, I just want to say, love your dogs, learn about them, study pedigrees, talk to other people about, what their dogs have produced and what they haven't produced. Um, get involved with the breed. Learn it inside and out, because that will only put you in good stead for the future. Um, and it's interesting. The history of the breed is interesting. The breed is interesting. Breeding dogs is an interesting hobby. Um, I've been fortunate that I've judged, in many different countries and met other breeders in other countries. And we all have something to talk about always. And keep your knowledge up so that you can have knowledgeable conversations with other like-minded people because they're so interesting to talk to. I've got so many good friends in England and in Australia and in Norway and Finland and Sweden and um, just some wonderful, wonderful friends who have bred beautiful dogs in their lifetimes. And it's it's just a very fulfilling um, hobby. It really is. So, just if you don't know something, find out what it is and find out the answers um, to what you need to know.
Well, that's a great wisdom to close out on. So thank you again for tuning into our legacy project, our Breeder Chronicles. We will see you back next month where we'll bring two more breeders to continue building this project for generations to come to be able to hear these stories. So thank you very much, Miss Wood. We all call you Bobbie, but Miss Barbara Wood, Emmy Award winning internationally recognized breeder who in the most serendipitous way, found her way into Lhasa Apsos by way of deciding to buy a Volkswagen. So
Right.
that's how you decided that you would start
That's
breeding
fun.
dogs. So if you would
Yeah,
have went and got a Ford or something else, maybe we wouldn't be here today.
that you got that right.
So good day to everyone, and until we meet again.